What if suffering isn't a mistake? What if pain isn't a flaw in life, but the very proof that you're alive? In this video, we're not asking how to avoid suffering. We're asking why it follows us everywhere, and why some part of us might secretly need it. Let's begin. Why is suffering so central to human life? And more importantly, why do we seem to seek it, even when we say we don't?
I think the point of the matter is human life as we know it, culturally, it is all about struggling to achieve something. Mostly because there is an intrinsic belief in us that any reward, anything that we can ever acquire, requires some sort of some sort of, what do you call, a struggle in it, and that is why struggle itself is of value, because we see struggle as a precursor to a reward. The fact of the matter is that if we end up getting something for free, if we in nature, let's look at it evolutionary speaking, right? If you get some of sweet fruit for free, that means it might as well be a trap, right? Venus flytraps are like a way of trapping you. So we come from nature, we come from a survivalist sort of civilization, we come from animals who wanted to survive, and therefore our intrinsic wiring is that in order to get something which is worthy of survival, which is worthy of reward, we need to suffer first.
Exactly. And that's the evolutionary layer of it. But here's the crack in that logic. If suffering is just a means to an end, then why do some people seek it even when there's no reward at all?
I think there is some sort of what do you call? There might be a reward. That is the point. There is always a reward for suffering. Can you give me any example of people who don't suffer for a reward? I mean, see, there might not always be an an extrinsic reward, right? I might not get a can of Diet Coke because I suffered. I might not get a power bank because I suffered. I might not get a speaker because I suffered. But the reason I suffer is a lot of times the reward itself is intrinsic, and that is, for example, confidence is also a reward. For example, feeling good about yourself is also a reward. If I am getting dopamine signaling in my brain, if I am getting happy hormones in my brain, if I am getting endorphins in my brain, it doesn't matter if the a reward is external or it is abstract in nature, because ultimately the biological mechanisms remains the same: happy hormones.
Exactly. So even when the outside world gives you nothing, your brain pays you in chemical currency: dopamine, pride, clarity, self-worth. Which means suffering isn't just a path to reward. Suffering is the ritual that unlocks meaning. So here's the next punch. If all meaning is born from suffering, then is a painless life actually meaningless?
I would actually like to quote Buddha on that. So Buddha, who is basically the founder of Buddhism, his story was that he was a prince who had never suffered, a prince who had never seen hunger, who had never seen illness, who had never seen death. And when he first went out to stroll around the city for the first time, he saw all of those things, and those were things that were sheltered to him, that were supposedly not that were supposedly hidden from him, because his father had a belief that if he never saw suffering, then he'll have a happy life. But his entire life was hollow the moment he figured out that ultimately life's meaning is non-existent. When he figured out the truth of life was death, the truth of life was suffering, that is when he gained a purpose, and that is when he became Buddha himself. He went on in his journey, and his journey was about removing suffering. I get that, but even the journey of removing suffering was riddled with suffering, and even Buddha, the anti-suffering head of a religion himself, is someone who suffered to get to that realization. So suffering was essential even in the journey of the figure who is known to be the biggest anti-suffering person, because it is not by the non-existence of suffering that there is peace, it is by the removal of it that it is peace. You need to go through suffering, you don't need to be absent of it.
Exactly. That's the paradox. Even the pursuit of peace demands pain. And Buddha didn't escape suffering. He disproved the illusion that peace comes from avoiding it. His entire awakening was triggered by exposure to suffering, not by pleasure. So if even enlightenment needs suffering as its catalyst, then maybe suffering isn't just part of life. maybe suffering is life, and peace is just the name we give to surviving it.
I would actually disagree with that notion that suffering itself is life. I would say suffering is the breath of life, right? We live, so we have to suffer. That is the point of it. It is not me living itself is not suffering, but suffering is necessary for me living, right? The struggle is necessary. Even when I'm breathing, I'm taking something in from the atmosphere. When I'm eating, I'm devouring something and reducing it to nothing while I'm eating it. I am extracting the nutrients. Every process that I do is a way of consumption of the environment, is a way of friction against the environment, and therefore suffering is the breath of living, and therefore peace would be the absence of suffering, the absence of living, and therefore peace would be death.
And that's where it clicks. Peace isn't the reward for surviving life. Peace is what waits when life is over. Not a destination, but an absence. A silence that only begins when the friction stops. So then the deeper question is this. If suffering is the breath of life, why are we so obsessed with holding our breath?
We are so obsessed with holding our breath because, again, we struggle, right? For example, eating food is a part of life, yet we are figuring out superfoods that if we eat, we don't have to eat for X number of hours. A lot of things that we do are part of life, but we are trying to reduce it because I believe ultimately all what we are looking forward to paradoxically is not just living more, but it is in a way death itself. There is a concept called the death drive. There is a death wish among all of us, right? We are here for a few purposes only. The only purpose that we have is to reproduce and expand our species, is to then try to live long. But ultimately, existentially, if you go through history, every human being has a desire for death. They have a different means and thoughts of death. I mean, people talk about how they want to go, right? People talk about how they want to be surrounded by their family. Certain people want to go out like heroes. Even kids talk about death in ways that they see in stories. They want to be the one hero who fights as he's fighting, his family is escaping, something like that. Even in fictional stories, death is also immortalized because at the end of the day, it is the final destination. The fact is, even though we know death itself will lead to the eraser of our existence, paradoxically, it's something we desire because it is a goal we are looking forward to.
Exactly. That's the core contradiction inside every human being. We are wired to survive, but we are drawn toward erasure. We are told to fight for life, but secretly crave the stillness that death promises. So the truth is, we don't run from suffering because we fear it. We run from it because it reminds us we're alive, and deep down, a part of us is done with that.
Exactly. So the point is that as long as you're going to live, you're going to suffer, and it's fine because suffering is the breath of life, and therefore we shouldn't fight against it. Rather, we should experience it, embrace it. I'm not saying enjoy suffering, but I mean fully experience it, because it will also end. It's like going to school. Once we are out of school, we're nostalgic about our school days, right? We're nostalgic about the teachers, about the friends, about the punishments. That is the fate of life itself. If there is an afterlife, you're going to lament on your life. If there is no afterlife, then you're not even going to exist to lament. But the point is, as long as you're here, as long as you're stuck in a state, whether it is life or whether it eventually will be death, I think no matter what it is, you should completely and fully embrace it, experience it, because this life and the death that is coming are only going to happen to you once.
Suffering isn't some interruption to life. It's the friction that proves we're still here. It's not the enemy. It's the evidence. And in a world that promises comfort, chasing peace without pain is like trying to breathe without lungs. You don't have to like suffering, but if you run from it, you might just miss the very thing that makes life real. The scrape, the ache, the burn, that's the breath of living. And when it's over, it'll be over. So feel it while you can. Patterns are everywhere.